Hello, BookTube. It's Mike from Riff, Raff's Reading Renaissance, and we've got a very special edition today. I'm going to have a chat about a book I've buddy read with Emily.
Hey, my name is Emily and my channel is M Reads, and I'm so excited to talk about this with Mike. We read The Quiet American by Greene, and I think this will be a great discussion.
Before we dive into the book and our chat, let's start off with just giving a shout out to Shelley Swearingen, who was the one who identified both myself and Emily early on in our BookTube careers. Shelley's a huge BookTuber, up there with the Steve Donahue type of subscriber count, but she identified both of us as youngsters to watch, and being called a youngster for me is quite a compliment. So thank you, Shelley, for bringing us together. It's been a lot of fun. And let's see how we go forward. I saw your edition, Emily. I read a different edition. In fact, my edition is actually the movie tie-in edition.
Oh, okay.
So I've got Michael Caine and the guys on the cover.
Mine is a Penguin Classics Deluxe edition. I think they've published a few of Greene's novels in these. So.
Yeah, I was looking online and there's just millions of covers. It's obviously a book that's just kept selling and selling and selling.
Yes.
So some people like it. Yeah. Maybe we should start just by sort of putting the book into some sort of historical context. It was published in 1955, I understand, and it's set in 1952. I did a little quick sort of Google research, and the context I sort of understand for the book was that the coming out of the Second World War, the US had been seen to have saved Europe. The United Nations was formed to create world order, and despite Russia having been on America's side in World War II, quite quickly tensions arose and Cold War environments started. And as far as Vietnam was concerned, I have a history book on Vietnam. This is a history book on Vietnam. It's a bit of a monster. So I tend to dip in and out. For some reason, I don't know why, Vietnam as a conflict, I find much more fascinating than others. You know, like Korea or it's always
and
Vietnam.
I think it is. But honestly, I'm not very well informed about it, to be honest. I feel like in America, we try to forget at least our involvement in it because it was terrible.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
So I feel like we try to focus. We end up focusing on the world wars and don't talk as much about Korea and Vietnam.
Yeah. What I discovered was that prior to World War II, the French had colonized it, and they called it French Indochina. Then during the Second World War, the Japanese took control of it, and then shortly after the Second World War, Ho Chi Minh and Viet Minh beat Japan and declared independence. And in 1950 was the separation of North Korea and South Korea, and 1954 was the Geneva split of Vietnam into North and South. You know, so that's the sort of, I suppose, the other note I've got here is that the whole McCarthyism of anti-communist activity was big in the early 50s. All of this happening just as the novel was both published and set. So that's sort of just a context for the book itself. Then I must admit, Greene has been an author that I've always wanted to read. In fact,
because you've never read anything from him other than this, have you? Okay,
I haven't, and I've always felt that that's an oversight, to the extent, and as you know, my videos wouldn't be anything if I didn't keep leaning back and pulling books out. So,
hey, I love it.
So I've actually. This is a monster. This is Graham Greene's compendium. It's like they're all there in one monster pack.
Oh, wow.
These are books from the 80s. These are all secondhand now. They're long out of print.
Yeah.
But I keep finding them, and they're wonderful. If you like an author, you get the whole lot in one go. And then I've also picked up his short stories. This is his
I don't know
complete
that I really
short
knew
stories.
he had short stories.
Well, apparently they're very good. But I still got to get to them. And then this I found literally a few days ago. This is his sort of rework of Don
Uh,
Quixote.
I've heard
But
good things about that one.
yeah, but I haven't read it, so they're all in the TBR. This
Yeah.
endless TBR that we lose
Right.
control over.
Especially now that we're on BookTube, like it just
Yeah.
grows and grows and grows.
So I
But
tried
I
to.
know Graham is kind of known more for his like Catholic novels, so to speak, which I don't really think that this is considered
No.
one of those as much. I feel like I can see shades of it there, but I feel like he's more known for like The Power and the Glory and The End of the Affair, Brighton Rock, those kind of novels.
Definitely. I think this was one of his later novels. If I look at the sort of chronology, because you're absolutely right, he sort of drifted into sort of more moral dilemmas. He became Catholic
As his
apparently.
Catholicism waned.
Yeah, yeah. Full disclosure, I was raised a Catholic. I'm not anymore, but I was raised a Catholic. But so
Oh.
I know the backstory. But
Yeah.
he apparently he married someone who was Catholic and therefore became Catholic, but he
Right.
described himself as a Catholic agnostic. So I'm not
Mhm.
sure how you work that one
Right.
out. But the common theme of his book seems to he was big on moral dilemmas, whether that was sort of Catholic and religion or just broader ethical type of moral dilemmas. But the other thing I discovered about him was that he was a journalist and a war correspondent, and that his novels tend to reflect the stories that he actually had lived in real life, in various ways. And I've seen quite a few of his films, but I always feel a little
Oh, okay.
uncomfortable. I feel a bit uncomfortable about that because I'm a strong believer that you should read the book first and then see the film.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Very much
Um,
agreed. Yeah, I would not have watched, I don't think I would have had the same takeaway from watching the movie of this as I did from reading the book.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I discovered about him was that he was bipolar and suffered from manic depression.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and apparently, well, to me, that slightly explains what I found in this book and what I've heard about his other books, that a lot of his central characters are down. They're quite cynical, quite sort of I won't quite use the word depressed, but sort of long
A little
suffering.
nihilistic and
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. Like Fowler in this book. And I have to be very honest again, I find those characters quite appealing. I actually, I'm glad I'm not
Okay,
alone.
okay. I thought you were going to say the opposite.
No, I have to say, I find the sort of the preppy, do-gooder type just dull. You know
Like
what I mean?
Kyle.
I'm sure they're wonderful in real life, but in novels and in literature, I find the guys, the sort of world weary, the guys who've seen it all
Yes.
and realize that things aren't as simple as they seem. I find
Right.
those characters fascinating.
Yeah.
And certainly Fowler seemed to me to be that kind of guy where his motivations weren't straight line. They were complex and then,
Yes.
but I'm just looking at my notes here about Graham Greene as an author. The only other thing I picked up of curiosity relating to the spy side of things was he was a huge influence on John le Carre, who I haven't read either, but everyone I know says le Carre is fantastic. Have you read le Carre?
I have not, and honestly, I have two on my shelf, but neither one is The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, which I want to read first.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that seems to be a good introduction to him, so I want to read that one first.
I completely agree with you, but I've never met anyone who doesn't like John le Carre. So there it is.
I
And
haven't either.
the other thing that I really did surprise me is that Graham Greene worked for Kim Philby, who was a spy in the English establishment. There was a, I'm not an expert on this, but there was a scandal when a whole bunch of people were exposed as spies who'd come through Cambridge University. And they'd been working at very high levels in MI6, which is, of course, Britain's secret service. And one of them was Kim Philby, and Graham Greene had actually been working for Kim Philby. So he obviously was very tapped in and very knowledgeable. And I think, again, that ties into this sort of cynical world weariness by the
I'm
time
sure. I'm sure.
he got to tell the stories in his novels. So
Yeah, just I
that's
mean, when you get to see that side of the world, and that's almost all you see, they can't help but come through in your writing, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Shall we chat a little bit about the characters in the book or the story itself? I
Yes.
presume we're going to try not to do too much in the way of spoilers, or is this a spoiler free or a non-spoiler
Um,
free?
I mean, I think it's okay for it to have spoilers because I mean, the main death is in the very beginning. So I don't know that there's I mean, I guess we can leave the exact way
Yeah,
he died out, because that's
yeah,
I guess the main
yeah.
thing, but
Okay. Yeah. Well, do you want to kick off by telling me what you thought of any of the characters, or?
sure. I mean, I Fowler to me, like you said, very world weary, cynical, just I think he lies to himself quite a bit. I think he's not as uninvolved as he likes to act like he is. I think that's just his way of keeping a facade up so he doesn't care too much because I think it's hard for him to be vulnerable like that. Um, Pyle is annoying in his puppy doggishness and his ignorance of things. It's like I want to like Pyle so bad, but he's naive and the way he views the rest of the world is it very much is what frustrates me about many Americans nowadays and how we think of the world. And we can kind of get into that a little bit more later too. And then Fong, I Graham just doesn't give her any agency of her own, you know.
I completely agree with that, and I think actually I'll come back to the two guys, but if I can pick up on Fong,
Yeah.
I wish I could claim this insight as my own, but I read it somewhere else. I was reading someone else's thoughts about this book, and I think there's a reason for that. I think that Fong is Vietnam to Graham Greene,
Mm,
and he's
hmm.
actually making the point about the colonial oppression. And I had if I could just, I don't know if this analogy works, but again, if I compare to my own experience of South Africa as a country that's had oppression and well, colonialism
Right.
and then further oppression. A lot of the novels written about South Africa will also have, for example, female characters, invariably black female characters, who are
Hmm.
not fully realized. And
Hmm.
the lack of fully realizing of the character is not a failure of the writing, it's a reflection of the social
Yeah,
environment. You know what I mean?
that's true. Yeah, I think that's fair.
I don't know. Look, I'm not vouching for Graham Greene's ability to write women. I don't know because I haven't read enough Green.
No,
He
me
may be
neither.
bad at it, but I did think that was quite an interesting take, that he was
Hmm.
using her as a sort of symbol of um, the sort of innocence and repression of Vietnam in the light of all this
Yeah,
continued colonial
and I think
ambush.
there was one part I marked. I think it was where it was some conversation where Pyle and Fowler were talking to each other about Fong, and Fong is right there. And I think through Fowler's narration, he notes like they talked about her like she wasn't there, and that she was sometimes invisible, like peace.
Yes,
And I
yes.
just thought that was really interesting.
Yes, yes. I found the writing like that was quite good. The other thing I found about the quality of the writing, two lines that I marked, the one I've got on the screen, the other I'll grab the book, was when they're planning the eventual murder, but
Hmm.
between well, let me not say too much, you know what I mean, but he's talking to some sort of government type
Hmm.
official, but the diplomatic double speak that they use, there's a line there that I wrote down that says, my contact will act as gently as the situation allows. And I thought, wow,
Yes. Hmm.
given that they're describing a planning to kill somebody, it was quite a powerful example of diplomatic speak.
Oh
The
yeah.
other thing you talk about, the sort of puppy dog. The thing I think that irritated, I think it was meant to irritate us, so I think it was a success. But
Right.
Kyle irritated me in a sense that he was forgive me if this comes across a little sexist, but he was making a move on Fowler's girl, but he was trying to be so polite about it. He was
I'm like, surely this is not how any men I know would have this conversation.
Exactly.
Well, the conversation just wouldn't happen.
Exactly. And I just found that it was clever, because I think it did play to the hopeless naivety of Pyle. That despite the fact that he was doing something that would clearly upset Fowler, he wanted to do it the gentlemanly way. And I found myself thinking,
right,
this is the 1950s, dude, not the 1800s.
Well, okay, and you talking about Fong is just kind of a representation of Vietnam. Maybe it's Fowler's own naivety regarding Vietnam also shown to Fong, and he's approaching Fowler kind of in the same way that he's approaching the other factions in Vietnam. Like, well, of course, don't you want this? Surely it's in Fong's or Vietnam's best interest. So of course we would do it this way.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make sense?
Yes. Yes. And I must admit, I also loved the fact that I have to say, Michael Caine is the perfect casting for Fowler, because
he was great for Fowler.
Michael Caine to me embodies that world-weary, cynical hero, the sort of damaged hero. And I loved the fact that there was always this sort of tension. He's a guy that's sort of getting by with a lot wrong in his life. Do you know what I mean? His marriage hasn't worked. Right. He's now made an arrangement with Fong, and he's trying to manage his wife and the Catholic divorce issue. And even with Pyle, I think Fowler never really resolves why he ends up deciding to do what he does about Pyle.
Right.
Is it personal? Is it principle? Is it, I loved the sort of imperfection. I've used a phrase sometimes when I'm talking about characters in literature: perfect imperfection. The perfect being the author capturing it. Because I do, maybe I'm also old and cynical, who knows, but I don't think we're perfect. I don't think we don't live in a straight line. It's all over the place. And I love when literature captures that.
Yes.
It's to
it's
me
beautiful.
My characters don't need to be great or good or perfect. They need to be real, and I think that I think Graham Greene got that very right.
Well, let me ask you this about just kind of the little love triangle situation. Do you think either Fowler or Pyle really loved Fong?
That's a great question. I think Fowler, no, because I think Fowler was quite, maybe narcissistic is too hard a word, but I think Fowler was in it for Fowler. And somehow Fowler, I think, had maybe he was a typical guy of the 1950s, who knows, but I think Fowler had sort of rationalized that his job was to just get by in life, and whatever works works, and I think Fong worked. Okay, so Pyle, I think Puppy Dog Pyle wanted to do the right thing, I think I got the impression in the read, and I almost wonder if I need to read it again to check, but I think Pyle was quite infatuated with Fong, because funny enough, I was watching a thing just yesterday from the director of the movie. I think I've lost his name for the moment. Not Philip Noyce, is it? I think, and he said they were talking about how hard they found to cast Fong, because they said all the girls that and it was obviously shot in Vietnam, but all the girls that they tried to recruit were too modern and too Americanized, the idea of the American culture impacting everywhere around the world. They were saying that they had a clear vision that they wanted this sort of traditional, because clearly Fong is traditional. If you look how the sister manages things, and he said they really struggled until they found the girl they found, and she was a ballet dancer, and because of her ballet dancing training, that brought the discipline of the sort of stillness and the movements and the lack of modernity that they were looking for.
Right.
Sorry, that was a side note, but I'm tying it into.
No, that's interesting.
I was fascinated by that, because another thing I have to admit is I think in the movie, what's his name, who plays Pyle? Brendan Fraser.
Brendan Fraser.
I don't like Brendan Fraser. I don't know why. I've never
See,
liked.
I like him because I'm a millennial. I like him in The Mummy, which is where I first encountered him.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I've loved him in anything else,
I don't know
frankly.
why, and I can't even place a movie to blame it on, but I've always found him slightly irritating. So he was perfect in this movie. For me,
Right.
it
Yeah.
was like Pyle was unlikable because of this sort of puppy dogging. And yeah, but to come back to a question about were either of them actually, and I think Pyle was infatuated, but whether I don't know. Fowler, I think, was just sort of getting along to get along. You know what I mean? That was my feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt for Fong, and I found her sister an interesting character as well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, see, to me, and that kind of contributed too to the fact that like Fong just had no agency of her own. She's drifting between men at the direction of her sister and of circumstance. And I don't know. I don't know that I could say that Fowler loved her, but I think he loved her the best that he could, that he was capable of, because he at least understood her where Pyle did not.
Yeah.
Pyle didn't understand her any more than he understands the country, you know, and which is why he thought it would be fine just to cart her back off to America and leave her there with her mother to set up house for him. Like, how insane is that?
Yeah.
So at least Fowler understood that, like, he couldn't take Fong to London and leave her there unless he gave her a return ticket back. So he at least knew that she would never survive or thrive outside of the culture that she's used to.
Yeah. The thing that
so I mean, he's definitely in it for himself, but
yes,
I think he at least understood her.
The thing that worried me about him, and as you say, in it for himself, was he was definitely stringing her along in terms of the letters and what they were and weren't saying. That wasn't fair play, you know.
He was keeping her from what she could deserve otherwise. Yeah.
Yes. I think the sister was an interesting character to me. Obviously, not a central character, but she was a sort of reminder of the brutal realities. Do you know what I mean? She was the one who was not interested in how Fong felt about either of these two guys.
Right.
It was a sort of
just like, look, you're going to have to marry somebody to be able to survive out here. Exactly. So I'm trying to find you the best person possible that can do the best for you.
Yeah, and Fong's Pyle's balance sheet was better than Fowler's balance sheet.
Right.
And that was, you know what I mean? It was
and Pyle actually had the ability to marry her where Fowler didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Interesting, but I have to say, lovely characters. It was a good story. There's a piece, before I forget, there's a piece I just wanted to read about the actual writing. Now I have to take this off so I can read. You know, the scene where Fowler's sitting in the cafe just before the big explosion.
Yes.
I was particularly struck by how Graham Greene wrote that piece. You know, again, for context, I lived through the 1980s here, which was a bad time in this country with, you know, lots of bombs and lots of, you know, unrest. And the thing about it, and I guess if you think about, I don't know where you were when 9/11 happened. I was in an office block in the Netherlands with a big TV set in the reception area. Oh, right. But you know how the world changed from everything was totally normal and suddenly it wasn't. I was very struck by the writing. I must just find the right passage here. I've got it. Where he's talking about something totally mundane, like a couple of women sitting at this cafe. Let me just read.
And he's talking about the other woman's compact.
Yeah.
That she has.
He says, I watched them idly as they went out side by side into the sun-splintered street. It was impossible to conceive either of them a prey to untidy passion. They did not, they did not belong to rumpled sheets and the sweat of sex. Did they take deodorants to bed with them? I found myself for a moment envying them in their sterilized world, so different from this world that I inhabited, which suddenly inexplicably broke in pieces. And that's it. That's when the bomb goes off. You know, it goes on to talk about two of the mirrors on the wall flew. But the way he just went from the totally mundane thinking about these boring people sitting here to
Mm-hmm.
suddenly the world. I thought that was extremely powerful writing.
It was
Um,
great.
I
Well, maybe
always
because
love
like because you're just as swept up in it, like you almost don't realize it's happened, just as you would be kind of
exactly.
shell shocked in a real moment.
I actually had to go back and read that paragraph again because
Mm-hmm.
I'm going like, what? now?
What?
But
What?
yeah, it was so realistic because that's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
life is like. It's fine and then it's not suddenly, instantly.
Right.
So there were moments like that where I thought, wow, this guy does know how to write. This is good writing.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
I marked another one, but I think that was the most important one. Boom. Yeah. Um, Yeah, I liked the passage. I won't bother to read it, but I liked the passage where he was in the plane and they were sort of dive bombing and flying up and
Yeah.
down. The
Mm-hmm.
description of how that worked, including how his body was thrown against the guy in front, and when I read that, I sort of felt like I was there.
Yeah.
It was quite
A
visceral
little
writing.
nauseating.
Yeah, I mean, I know they describe Graham Greene's style because of his being a reporter as being very accurate, sort
Kind of
of
like
detailed.
direct and
Yeah,
yeah.
and I found that I really felt wow. I almost felt like I'm experiencing the event, which is quite impressive for writing. But yeah, I mean,
What do you
certainly,
think about Fowler trying to make the distinction between him being a reporter versus a correspondent?
yeah. I think that there's that whole issue about trying to remain uninvolved. I've never really
Mm-hmm.
understood how that works because I've never been in
I
that
don't think it does.
situation. Yeah,
I don't
but I
think it
mean,
does work.
again, I've got books here of photographs that journalists took during some of the worst atrocities of apartheid, and it always comes back in my mind to okay, you're taking a photograph of what the terrible thing that's happening over there. Would it not be better maybe to try and put the camera down and do something about it? And I don't know the
Right.
answer because, of course, if you do put the camera down, there's no record. You're
Right.
probably not going to be able to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a conflict that I've
It's
always won.
so
I've often wondered
difficult.
about that.
And
Yeah,
and I think, at least as far as Fowler's concerned, I don't think it's possible to remain neutral. I mean, obviously, if you don't know what's going on, you're neutral because you don't have enough facts to make a determination. But otherwise, I think the only way you can remain neutral is if you have no convictions and values of your own.
yeah, that's very
But I think
interesting.
but I think if you have any principles or values, you're bound to make some kind of determination or opinion about where you fall. I mean, and that
Yes.
can be a nuanced position, but it's going to be a position.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe that's interesting what you say because maybe his principles had collapsed. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
the cynicism had got to a point
Yeah.
where he no longer was living by any principles because I think he tried to persuade himself that he did what he did about Pyle because
Mm-hmm.
Pyle was a danger to society, as it were. Whereas
Right.
in reality, I think Pyle was a great inconvenience to him.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I wasn't at all convinced by his higher values or his higher
Right.
um, motivations. Let's say,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Well, yeah, even by his own admission, he's like, I'm not picking sides here. I'm just reporting on facts.
yeah, indeed. Um, yeah, I do think that sort of that moral conflict I understand is a common theme of Greene's. About
Mm-hmm.
there's a right thing, there's a practical thing. I find I very much liked that. I find it irritating when books say, "Look, there's good and there's evil." I just don't believe the world works that
Right.
way. I
Yeah.
think there's thousands of shades of grey, and I found that very interesting. The sort of by telling the story, you're actually exploring all those pros and cons, and I
Mm-hmm.
found that very interesting.
Well,
Um,
and Greene leaves it open.
mm,
He doesn't make a determination, which to me, those are the best novels when the writer leaves it up to you to decide what you feel about it and doesn't try to direct you to a particular conclusion.
Absolutely. I think it recognizes that life's complex. It's
Yes.
it's not simple. should we quickly talk about the film? Um,
Oh, sure.
uh, I'm aware that there are two film versions, a 1958 version and the more recent one that probably everybody knows. My research on the 1958 one quickly led me to not bother to see it because it was made literally 3 years after the book. So if you like, it might have been a sort of a money grab. And
Yeah.
more important than that, my understanding is that it completely turned the novel upside down, and it basically just came from a perspective where isn't it great that America's going to fix Vietnam, and totally missed Greene's point about the
Yeah.
questions related to that thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Greene
the trailer
apparently.
I watched for that
Oh,
version was
oh,
very much that way. Like I watched the trailer to even
okay,
just see if it was worth watching, and it was very much like that. Just,
okay.
hey, America's here to fight the communists, and you know,
Yeah, which I guess was the mood at the time. But Graham Greene
right.
he disowned the movie. He hated the 1958 movie.
Hmm.
But I have to say the 2002 movie was a very rewarding watch. I enjoyed it.
I think so too.
I have to admit, I think I've watched it before long ago, before
Hmm.
I got around to reading the book, but so long ago that I'd sort of forgotten the story.
Okay.
But I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I think Michael Caine was born to play Fowler. I mean, he's
He's great.
he embodies.
Great.
I heard somebody say that they think that's Michael Caine's greatest role ever. I don't know if I'd go that far
Oh,
because
wow.
there's a lot of roles competing for that title, but he certainly just embodies that slightly
Hmm.
world weary either report, in this case reporter. I've seen him play diplomats, with the sort
Yes.
of the same sort of weighed down feeling of the realities of the
Hmm.
situation. And I have to say, whatever I think personally about Brendan Fraser, he was perfect for Pyle.
I agree too. He
Yeah,
was. Yeah, just very almost arrogant in his ignorance.
yes,
You know.
yes. And I don't have the name of the young lady who played Pong, but she was, of course, absolutely wonderful. She was
She
perfect,
was.
and I did like the lady who played the sister. She
Yes,
got
I
that
did too. She
she
was
got
funny.
that button down very,
Hmm.
very much.
And you could just feel Fowler's irritation with her, you
Yes,
know.
yes, yeah. I thought it was an excellent film, given that films often struggle to capture the essence of the novel. I thought it did that very well. Um,
Let me ask you one thing about the film that struck me a little bit, because obviously there's going to be some differences in an adaptation, but in the film, I felt like at the end, after the explosion happened and things like that, they made Pyle seem a little more nefarious than he came across to me in the book.
yeah,
Did you feel that
very much.
way?
Definitely,
Okay.
there's no question because in the film version, Pyle suddenly starts talking fluent for Vietnamese,
Right. That never
and that
happens here.
that does not happen in the book. So I think that's a
Yeah.
liberty that they took. I can see. I
Yeah.
suppose they
In the
were
book, he remains more truly innocent.
naive.
I mean,
Yes,
innocent in his thinking, at least.
yes. I don't know whether maybe the movie was trying to compact things and drive the point home, but yeah,
Probably.
I didn't feel that was necessary. Look. I don't like films that take liberties with the book. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
To
Sure.
me, the book is more important than the film. I like films because 90% of the world won't ever read the book, so they might as well see the
Right.
film. But yeah, it didn't ruin the film for me, but I agree with you. I noticed it and I thought,
Hmm.
why are they doing that? It's not in
Yeah.
the book. That was different. And the other tiny change is that at the end of the film, where they're sort of wrapping things up visually, the footage takes us beyond the book. They actually end up with
Right.
the sort of US soldiers
Into the fully
going into
American
Vietnam.
part of the conflict.
Yes, which I suppose is fair enough. It's just telling the audience that that's where the story goes. But
It's an
yeah,
American film. We have to feature us more heavily. We have got.
yes. The other thing I picked up about the film is that they were doing screen tests on the 10th of September 2001, the day before 9/11. And because
Wow.
9/11 happened the next day, the movie produced Miramax, who owned the movie, delayed the
Hmm.
release for a year because they felt this movie, with its
Hmm.
questions about American patriotism, um,
Yeah.
just that I thought that was
Hmm.
a curious
Not the
fact.
best time.
Yeah, interesting fact. The other story, completely unrelated, but I don't know whether you knew this, that Microsoft Windows were about to release a new version of Windows just before 9/11, and the graphic design of the packaging was people floating through Windows. So of course that got pulled very fast. It's a totally arbitrary fact, nothing to do with the book.
Wow.
But yeah, it's talk about timing, hey? Yeah, and I see Kane was nominated for Oscars, Golden Globes, BAFTA awards, which he didn't win, but the film won the American Film Institute Movie of the Year and the London Film Critics Award Best Director and Best Actor for Michael Caine. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a huge Michael Caine fan from basically forever. It was
great.
I enjoyed that film version of the film very much. I guess that takes us then beyond the film into the question of America's role. What Greene was basically exploring is of course, the book isn't only looking at America. It starts with the French colonial domination in Vietnam, and just from a personal, I'd love to hear your perspective, but from a personal point of view, I mean, I was born in the 60s. My father was quite old. He was born in 1908, so he lived through the Second World War, and he was very pro-Churchill and very the take I heard as a kid was that America had come to the party and saved Europe from the tyranny of Hitler. And therefore, by default, sitting way down here in South Africa, we did sort of see America as the good guys in the white hat on the white horse. You know, that was the image. The first kink in the armor for us was sort of President Nixon and Watergate. That was the first time we thought, well, hang on, aren't these guys supposed to be the good guys? You know, I suppose the other thing that was happening globally was that the 60s saw a wave through Africa of and India and other places like that of anti-West, you know, time for independence, anti-colonial, that whole movement. And the other strange perspective from my world in South Africa was that apartheid South Africa was using the communist threat as a justification for the status quo. So much so that once the Soviet Union fell in the 1990s, it was pretty quick after that that democratic change came to South Africa, because the sort of Red Scare just evaporated overnight.
It's over.
And, you know, I remember that sort of in the 80s, people like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were not vociferously anti-South African. Margaret Thatcher's famous for having called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. You know, and of course, context and times and everything changes. So my perspective of America's role in the international stuff, I suspect it probably mirrors a lot of American people, where coming out of World War II, America did play a role, and there's no question that after World War II, without America, there wouldn't have been a United Nations. There wouldn't have been the organizations, both economic and financial, that created a world order that was stable and trying not to have a third world war, basically. I suppose if one's critical, you can argue that it didn't yet address the need of people for independence around the world, but that wasn't all on America. That was colonialism, which, you know, in fact, the American experiment came out of an anti-colonial drive. So that's
as Kyle says in the movie, he's like, we're not colonialists.
So that's sort of the first half, if you know what I mean. I see it almost in two halves, and then sort of round about the era. I mean, when George Bush arrived, I think George Bush was the first American president of my lifetime, and Nixon was the first president I remember as a kid. You know, prior to Nixon, I know the names, but they're part of the history books. But Nixon, I do remember seeing him in the newspapers, things like that. George Bush was the first president that we sort of thought, oh, okay, hang on, this guy doesn't have the same level of gravitas and statesmanship and all that kind of stuff. I suppose if one looks back from today, there's a different perspective. I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to have him back. But uh, and then of course 9/11 happened, and to me, I very much remember a global feeling of today we're all Americans. You know,
Hmm.
that
Right.
worked for a bit, and then sort of the honeymoon period started dropping off. And again, forgive, I
Right.
keep making South African allusions, but I remember straight after the release of Mandela and the democratic election here, there was a short period where
Hmm.
we could do no wrong. We were just flavor of the month.
Sure.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't last. It wears off when reality sets in. Um,
Hmm.
and I guess things like, Saddam Hussein and Afghanistan and that sort of thing, we my perspective was I had huge sympathy for America's desire to um, at least see justice done. Let's not call it get revenge, because that's maybe not
Hmm.
right. But I understand that. I think that was very fair. I think where it went wrong was that some of the wrong decisions were taken in terms of going after the wrong
Hmm.
people in the wrong places,
Sure.
and that made it harder to hold the coalition of support together.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, but I have to say, up to all of that point, from an outside perspective looking at America, there was still one America. There was still an
Hmm.
America that may be arguing internally, but to the outside world was one America. And I
Sure.
think that has changed. Um,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm conscious I'm talking a lot here. I must give you a chance to,
No, no,
to react.
I love it.
But I mean, I've often thought, and I've tried to get to the bottom of, when did it shift from one America to the partisanship you see today, where it feels to the rest of us like two Americas. And my
Hmm.
theory is it's around about the time of Newt Gingrich, because
Well,
Newt
mhm.
Gingrich apparently was the strategist who decided that if the Republicans were going to win in the future, because the demographics were against them,
They were
if
changing.
the
Yeah.
if the Republicans were going to win, they had to have a different strategy. And that strategy of Newt Gingrich's, I believe, from what I've read, and I'm maybe wrong, you have a much closer to the ground than I am, but my understanding is that it was his strategy that created this idea of, this is not a sort of a collegial thing, where we all get together
Hmm.
for drinks after having debated and argued. It was almost
Yeah.
like war. You're either with us or
Right.
you're against us, type of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I've heard a lot of people say that Donald Trump is not the cause. Donald Trump is a symptom. Um,
Hmm.
that this thing predates him.
Yeah.
Look,
No, I believe that's true.
I think what Donald Trump has done is he says the quiet part out loud, and I think
Hmm.
he's created an era where the divisions are more focused on and more emphasized than maybe was in the past. But
Hmm.
anyway,
Well, and
that's
I
a
think
lot of
just the
words.
whole advent of social media and things like that allows people to stay. Um, there's so much less in person communication. I mean, or even communication like we're doing right now, having a conversation. So much is just behind a keyboard typing things, where if I say something really awful to you, I don't have to see the reaction on your face to what I say. So I'm removed from the consequences of what I say and do in that respect. And so I think while technology is wonderful in allowing us to have these kind of conversations, it's a double-edged sword in that it's not handled well by a lot of people, and it kind of creates echo chambers and further division, and it's easy to stay in your camp and not listen to what somebody else has to say, and it's just all of that. And I think for Americans, at least, what frustrates me, I mean, and this is true of me to a large extent, but I think I'm going to speak generally because I know there are individuals that this is not true of, but as a whole, we are so ignorant of other cultures besides our own, so
Yeah.
ignorant of how they are and operate, and we just imagine that everybody is either like us or wants to be like us, and that is not always true. And I think that's very clear in Pyle. He's like, well, of course they want democracy. Why wouldn't they want democracy? You know, when their culture has no concept of what that is. You know, like when they're in the watchtower with those two Vietnamese soldiers, and Fowler's like, do they know they're fighting for democracy, Pyle? Don't you think you should tell them, you know, that's what they're sitting up here doing in the middle of the night? You know, and it's just that idea of, we just assume, just generally, that of course everyone else wants democracy. You know, and so we go into these other countries that are not prepared for it, nor do they really even want it, potentially. You know, I mean, every circumstance is a little different, but it's just that kind of ignorance of how another culture is going to accept this or deal with it.
Yeah, I think I always want to cut America a little bit of slack there, because I mean the success of the American experiment is so huge. I mean, if I just give you a parallel, I mean, my country and yours are going through a testy time at the moment.
Sure.
And I am economically concerned about that, because America's economy is 70 times bigger than South Africa's. And that, when you realize that scale, you know, I think, I mean, I do tend to agree with you. I think the rest of the world does think that America is a little bit inwardly focused sometimes. More so recently, of course, because you know, the rhetoric's starting to say that.
Sure.
But on the flip side of that, America's contribution to both the global economy and just the global existence is vast. I mean, and again, if I sort of
it's important, and I think it's been in ways largely beneficial, you know.
I think it is largely beneficial, and I think it's also under-recognized. If I would rewind to sort of pre-Trump's second term, because some of what's happened in his second term is undoing some of that international relationships. But going back to George Bush, for example, George Bush set up AIDS relief for Africa that has run since his time and has been massively beneficial. You know, and I think that I think it's not just a case of, you know, America's not interested. I think that, and also, again, think back to what the movie producer said about it's hard to find a Vietnamese actress that hasn't been touched by American culture. I mean, I think that's globally true. I think whether it's, you know, music or fashion or whatever, I mean, the American footprint is everywhere. And I don't think that's America's fault. You know what I mean? I think
that's true. I mean, you know, sometimes when you just do happen to be influential and others decide I mean, look, I don't mean to bash America, because I don't feel that way. I do think that I think America's flawed but wonderful, you know. And I think the core principles are wonderful, and I think we should continue striving to get back to representing what those core principles are. So, but I just think, I don't know if it's a failure of our educational system, or what, but I just don't know that I don't know, I just feel like we don't have enough knowledge about the rest of the world and how it truly operates. And, you know, we look at everything from a top down level, as opposed to, I think, probably trying to accurately really understand how another country and culture functions and the pros and cons of it. And, you know, I think even if we do talk about it, it's often talked about in a way that, of course, it's inferior because it's not American and American democracy. And I just think that does a disservice to how we approach other things. So
I think that's fair. Look, I have read a couple of books by people who've there's a guy called Rory Stewart, who's a British, he was a politician for a while, he's now a podcaster. And he, for example, walked across, I think it was it Iraq or Iran? I can't remember, but he literally walked the whole country and wrote a book about it when he got to the other side. And he makes the point about the fact that, and he doesn't single out America, I think he takes on the West to say that for all the good things that came out of Western democracy, and I'm always reminded of Churchill said that democracy is the worst system apart from all the others, which is which is quite a good way of putting it. But
Yeah.
he said that the West has sort of accepted that Western democracy and all the values you talked about are the right values for them, and therefore they try and impose those values as an improvement for others without understanding the sometimes thousands of years of culture and history that come with it, some of which is good. It's not all bad.
Right. Right.
And I think that's probably true of a lot of the world. If you look at the history of people invading places and colonialism, and I think invariably the stronger culture dominates, and sometimes it's a pity that we don't end up cherry picking the best of both, if you know what I mean. But I would also say, again, just to be a little bit defensive of the accusation that America doesn't understand the world, I'm not sure that a lot of the world understands each other. I mean,
I think that's absolutely. Oh, and I think I'm probably speaking about people in my own generation and younger.
Yeah.
Less so people older than me and my parents and grandparents. I think they probably have a better understanding than most people my age and younger do. I feel like I'm seeing it just get worse the younger as people go. And I think that's really kind of maybe what I'm speaking more to than
I also
otherwise.
think, at the risk of sounding like a grumpy old man, I think that is a global generational problem. I think the younger generation are not getting as well educated globally in terms of how things work. Maybe it's a perspective, from a guy who's not as young as he
I have no idea what history is being taught anymore at all. I've got no idea.
I'm often amazed when I talk about things just to people in the workplace, and they've never heard of things, some of which are quite foundational to either this country or global history. Or,
right.
I mean, one of the things we did here in this country as part of the process of moving from the old South Africa with its racism to the new democratic free South Africa was they set up an institute called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The idea was that those who had committed atrocities could come and give witness in exchange for forgiveness and clemency as a way of dealing with the trauma, because a lot of victims simply wanted to know what happened. People had disappeared.
Right.
There was all kinds of trauma like
they
that.
need some closure.
Yeah, exactly. Now that process was headed up by a very well-respected Archbishop, Desmond Tutu, who went on to win a Nobel Prize. So as part of our history, that's a big deal in the story. But when I talk to kids in my work environment who are in their 20s, they've never heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Now, I mean, that's like not having heard of 9/11. It's just it's nuts.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But anyway, that's not our problem. But yeah. I do think the other thought I had while you were talking about America's awareness of the rest of the world, I think a lot of people criticize America's lack of awareness, but one needs to remember that as the biggest economy, you're sort of at the top of the pile looking down. So everyone else is going, you should be more interested in me. You know what I mean? I mean, if you pick a whole bunch of South Africans and ask them how India works, I'm not sure they're going to be that much better informed than the average American.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? I think you guys get the flack because you're at the head of the
and we're trying
scale.
to step into everybody else.
Yeah.
And I guess for me the thing is it's like, okay, great, let's go fight the communists. Okay, fine. Like I can get behind that. I don't think I think I'll dispense with any kind of conspiracy theories and things like that pop up. But I'll just say, let's just presume that America's acting with good intentions and going to rid a country of the communists. Okay. But then I think when you then try to subvert a whole culture and impose your own, that's where things start to get a little bit more fuzzy for me, especially depending on the country you're in and if they're prepared for that or not. Most of the time, probably being no.
Yeah. But I guess, like a good novel, it's never simple. It's always complex.
Never simple, which is why it's great.
Even if I think about, in my local context here, the African National Congress, which was the protest movement for all those years under Mandela, is actually a communist-trained organization, and
Oh, really?
their charter is called the Freedom Charter, and if you read it, it's sort of 1950s Soviet think, and the
Wow.
yeah, and the process we live through here is a real politic of that guiding principle hitting smash against a world that's run by the World Bank and the West. And I mean, this South Africa it would be a good novel, put it that way, because it is constantly complex. But what it does for me, if I'm honest, I don't know if you know this, but we have 11 national languages in this country. That's the scale.
No, I did not know it was that many.
That's the scale of complexity. We are a melting pot of many, many, many different ethnic groupings. And to be honest, I found that subconsciously an advantage. When I went to work in the Netherlands for some years, I was shocked at how bad the Europeans each were at understanding each other, the Germans and the English and the French, versus I found that those of us from the South, there was Australians, there were myself and some Brazilians, and they tended to be better at the interactions, sort of getting together in a global group. Do you know what I mean? And I found myself thinking, why is that? And I think a lot of it for me is that we live on a day-to-day basis in a very sort of melting pot of cultures, which is quite ironic given the history of this country, which was trying to separate everybody.
Right.
So things never end up where you think they're going to end up, but endlessly interesting and fascinating. But so that's the context in which I think I really enjoyed this book, because it was looking at a subject that's close to me, about sort of dominant forces and countries that might want to do it their own way and don't always have the chance to do it. But I always sort of say what I want from a book is a sort of an enriching experience. Either I've got to love the language or the story, or I've got to come out of it sort of feeling that I'm not better off. I just need to feel that I've achieved, I've gained something by reading it, and I certainly do in this case.
I did too. I did too. I definitely gave me a lot to think about and a lot to ponder.
And the biggest problem I've got now is I want to read more Graham Greene, but I've got so many other things that I thought I was going to read first.
The endless problem.
But I think we're getting there. We're just about there.
Yeah.
I think we've ticked off all the things we wanted to chat about.
I think this has been wonderful.
It has. It's been so much fun, I must admit. It's a new initiative for my channel, and I think probably for yours as well.
Yes.
I would recommend to anyone who hasn't read it, read it. It's not long. It was a shorty September. Too. How many pages was it? My edition is 185. It's a
I think mine was about. Yeah, but mine was 180. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
So it's too late for shorty September now, but it's a shorty, so read it.
But I will say, as for a short novel, this took me a little longer to read, maybe just because there was more to kind of chew on. It wasn't. Yes. It's not one you just breeze through to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's. I actually enjoy that. I'm always in this conundrum because I want to read faster and get through more books because there's so many. But the ones that force you to say, just slow down and do it properly, they actually end up with a richer experience, I think.
I agree.
It's a conundrum. What can you do? Anyway, so Emily, this has been so much fun. I think we're reaching the conclusion. I suppose we should.
Thank you so much for suggesting this video.
Not at all. I mean, it's a lovely book, and I do enjoy your channel, and I if I can have a word to my subscribers, go and check out Emily's channel. I think we'll both leave links to each other's channels in the bit below, as they say. And please, guys, if you enjoyed this, maybe like and subscribe, and let's see where we go next. Another buddy read on the horizon, perhaps. Who knows? But it's been great fun. Thank you, Emily.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. This has been great.
All right. We'll see you later, BookTube. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Bye.